what could be more typically British than sitting in a lovely sitting room enjoying afternoon tea? But just how British is this chintz cushion, that vase, the shape of this chair, this cup and saucer? In this programme, I'm going to show you just how un-British the British front room actually is. It's a fascinating story of how the East came to the West and stayed for good. Chin chin. In tonight's programme, we're going to explore two countries that have fascinated and inspired us for centuries. China and Japan. It's a rich and spicy history about the wonderful objects and styles from the East that we've adapted and adopted as our own.
This has become one of our most successful lines, which is, very peculiar if you look at it just like that.
Over the years, we've refined Oriental styles, pared them down, stripped them back, to this, the clean, minimalist look. It's a look that evokes peace, serenity and calm in a mad, bad and hectic world. Here in southwest London, Angela and Takashi Sawano have created their own little Oriental haven.
I, many years ago, went to Japan for the very first time, and I was walking along the street and I saw just one practically bare branch with one flower in front of the most gorgeous oak door, and I was bowled over. It was as if somebody had hit me. And then when I started going to Japanese houses, I was bowled over by this same simplicity in their rooms. And I think it just touched something in me, because from then onwards, I pared down everything in my home and my whole attitude changed.
Several words you keep using, which are simplicity, removing clutter, getting things back down to an essence. Takashi, are these the real keynotes of Japanese design, Japanese culture?
It is. As you see, in Japan is so many population and so many materialize and so busy. That's why I think Japanese people come back home and then complete opposite outside life. So they want to relax and they want a very simple life. And then next morning you coming back again.
Yes. Back into the maelstrom. Our love affair with the Orient reaches right back to the Roman Empire, when the silk routes from the east brought luxurious treasures like spices and silks to the west. We picked and mixed what we liked from the Far East, shook it up a bit, added plenty of European touches, and by the 17th century we called this exotic concoction chinoiserie, a wonderful, whimsical style that said more about us than it said about China, India, or Japan. Chinoiserie, for all its fiery dragons and pagodas, was a purely European style, inspired by genuine Oriental silk, chintz and porcelain. Fashionable 17th and 18th century homes weren't complete without whimsical blue and white china, lacquered furniture, or gilded ornate mirrors that we still love today. Look closely and you'll learn a lot about how far we've come since the 18th century. To the early fans of the style, Japan and China merged into one mind-boggling land of bizarre customs and fabulous treasures. All most of us knew was that it was a long way away, in a vaguely eastern direction. first stop on our magical mystery tour, the story of how the East came to the West, is here, Claydon House in Buckinghamshire. Fantastically plain on the outside, but just you wait. Behind these closed doors is one of the most bizarrely beautiful rooms in Britain. Hello.
Hello, Laurence. Welcome. I'm Edmund Verney, and
How
this is my son, Nicholas.
Hello. This is particularly amazing.
Well, this is what you've come to see, isn't it?
Well, actually, I mustn't be seduced by this, because lovely though it is, I'm after Chinese, specifically Chinese.
Ah, well, then you need to come upstairs, and we can show you something even more spectacular. So, here we are. This is what we've come up to see. Let me open the door. And there we are.
Wow. Well, you weren't lying, and that's for sure.
No,
That
that's
is
the pièce de résistance.
absolutely incredible. That is
That is the pagoda.
really.
If you come and look underneath, you can see the tea party going on.
The detail is absolutely amazing. To get to the roots of chinoiserie, you have to look at the most traditional of British customs, tea drinking. Today, tea is 10 a penny, but back in the 18th century, it was a luxury beverage. Can you see it?
Well, you have to stand right back to be
I
able
suppose so,
to see
yeah.
up there.
To show off their wealth, some aristocrats dedicated whole rooms to the ritual of taking afternoon tea. Here at Claydon, they built a veritable shrine to Cha. Which one of your great-great-greats was responsible for this?
Well, this was Rafe, who was the second Earl, and he commissioned Luke Lightfoot, who was a very eccentric carver, and he obviously wanted to have some of the best carving that anybody could have anywhere, and he gave the man pretty well carte blanche.
So this was chinoiserie with knobs on, with bells on, with flutes
Par
on.
excellence.
It looks like it's been made out of icing.
Genuine icing sugar.
Yeah. On a cake. Do they actually
There we
tinkle?
are. They don't tinkle, but they they do move like that.
Statues here as well.
The nodding head. My father did get approached once by an American, William Randolph Hearst, you know, the newspaper tycoon. He came round and he actually almost produced his checkbook, I think, and said, "Name your price, and I want to take that back and put it in my mansion in California."
I mean, it is a fantasy.
It is a fantasy, all right. Yes, that's exactly what it is. Maybe an over-the-top one.
Yeah. The exuberant explosion of feminine curves and flourishes, all based on natural forms, is typical of the Rococo chinoiserie style. This whimsical and delicate style was pioneered in the 18th century by the gilded court of Louis XV. And where the court led, everyone else followed. From Versailles, the taste spread quickly throughout the rest of Europe, making chinoiserie de rigueur amongst the fashionable aristocracy.
My ship has sails that are made of silk. The decks are trimmed with gold and of
In 1604, 5 ships from the now legendary British East India Company returned from their first voyage to the Far East, laden with oriental treasures. And what the East India merchants brought back was to radically alter the taste of the British. You can just imagine how magical these goods must have seemed to the Elizabethans. Glamorous silks, rugs, spices, and, of course, tea. And buried deep in the hold, sloshing around in the seawater, helping to keep the ships upright, were boxes of porcelain, which were considered to be the least precious cargo. People went mad for the stuff, flocking down to the docks over there whenever a ship came in. It must have been like the first day of the Harrod's sail.
Oh, honey, picture me upon your knee with tea for two
From being the most lowly of cargoes, Chinese porcelain soon came to be even more highly prized than tea. It was avidly collected from the 17th century onwards and was used to decorate whole rooms, much as we today pin our prized plates on our walls.
Tea, Laurence?
Thank you. I love your sideboard. It's very homely, it's very welcoming. Where did your love of blue and white come from?
I grew up with it. My grandfather was a saga maker's bottom knocker. This is absolutely true. That is that he loaded up the saga, which was an oval shape like this, and all the pottery went inside and stuck in a kiln. And his job was to take it out. When it cooled down, they knocked it to loosen it, and hence the title, Saga Maker's Bottom Knocker.
Fantastic.
What a name to conjure with. Yes, so I was surrounded by it. And I suppose, you know, being in that environment, I caught the bug.
Yeah. You've got blue and white blood then?
I think I must have, yes, yes.
Wow. Extraordinary amount of pieces. How many pieces have you got in here?
Oh, we've never counted.
Do you never worry about running out of space?
Well, yes, sometimes, but then we have this New Year's resolution that whatever comes in, something has to go out.
Are you sticking to it though?
Well, we tried and we failed.
The thing that really strikes me is the fact that this, you know, if you look at it on one level, I think a lot of people look at that and it's a very familiar, good taste British way of decorating. You know,
Right.
it's blue and white
Yes.
china,
Yep.
mantelpiece,
Yep.
gilt mirror behind it. But I wonder how many people really take in the fact that it's so exotic. The scenes themselves, they're like little tiny vignettes from fairy
Yes.
tales. There's obviously
Yes.
something going on in each one.
They're pictures,
Yes.
really, aren't
Yeah.
they? They're all pictorial.
But there, I mean, there's this constant thing with chinoiserie of you know, romanticising, exoticising anything that came
Yes.
over and saying, look,
Yes.
you know,
Yeah.
this is really important. There's more to this than meets the eye.
That's right.
Who'd have thought there was so much going on underneath your Sunday roast? The mania for Chinese porcelain grew. Designs based on European fantasies of the Far East were sent out from the West to be copied in China, and then sent back to us. So what we Brits thought of as Chinese was in fact nothing of the sort. It was actually a chronic case of Chinese whispers. This funny little fellow is a great example of how influence passed backwards and forwards, from east to west and back again. Fetch! 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 No, over there. I'll get it. Anyone who was anybody in mid-18th century Europe had to have a pet Chinese pug. They were the fashionable accessory. And just as today we collect pottery pooches, so in the 18th century a porcelain pug was the chic thing to have on your mantel shelf. When these designs were sent out to China to be copied and exported back to us, however, the Chinese must have been puzzled and amused. They would never have had such whimsical objects in their own homes. In the mid-18th century, our trading empire grew and a new middle class began to emerge, eager to show off its newfound wealth with beautiful interiors. And the place to come to buy the latest in home furnishings was here, London's Covent Garden, then the centre of the newly emerging furniture trade. And based here was the William Shakespeare of English furniture, the tastemaker of genius, Thomas Chippendale. Chippendale was an 18th century craftsman, but he had some extremely 21st century business ideas. In 1754, Chippendale published a catalogue that was to revolutionise the furniture trade. The gentleman and cabinet maker's director was calculated to improve and refine the present taste and suited to the fancy and circumstances of persons in all degrees of life. This catalogue was the furniture Bible that not only defined English furniture, but most importantly, how it was produced. Rather than wait for rich patrons to commission him, Chippendale produced this catalogue so that anybody could copy his designs or order them for their homes. And he didn't just design furniture. He's now recognised as being one of this country's first ever interior decorators, leading the 18th century fashion for chinoiserie. This is Nostell Priory, the grand 18th century country seat of Sir Rowland Wynn, one of Chippendale's greatest patrons. Now, finding real Chippendale is difficult enough, but here we're well and truly spoiled. There's over 100 accredited pieces, including some very rare examples of Chippendale's chinoiserie style.
Hello.
Hello.
How nice to see you.
Here at Nostell Priory, Chippendale was commissioned to decorate an entire suite of rooms in the chinoiserie style. And just like interior decorators today, he was responsible for the total look. Everything from carpets to curtains.
Now, this is the Chinese room.
Oh, wow.
With
Wow.
Really everything by Chippendale. The furniture.
Even things like the
The
blinds.
pelmet,
Yeah.
yes, the pelmet, which with a fringe around it, which matches the fringe on the bed.
Doesn't look terribly Chinese in a funny
Well,
sort of
now
way.
that's an interesting point because, in fact, it looks extremely Indian.
Yeah.
It's exactly like a howdah on an elephant.
So there was this sort of rather confused idea of what China was, it was just an exotic
People
sauce.
just thought the East, a long way away, whether China was near or far away from India, they didn't know at all. They just... See, there wasn't television in those days to educate people, so, so they couldn't know.
But I mean, it's the wallpaper that you really...
Yes.
The detail is extraordinary. And the colours, because what we see now, would it have been a lot brighter at the time?
It would have been extremely vivid. But talking about the vividness of the colour, you see how much this has changed in colour when I open that door.
That is, I mean, it's a true jade almost. What was it used for?
Well, it was a clothes press. You see, the coat hanger hadn't been invented. That happened quite a long time later, about 75 years later.
Yeah.
And they used to lay their clothes along all these drawers. And here are all these designs.
But this must have been what was so extraordinary at the time, that, you know, suddenly you had scenes of everyday life, albeit from the other side of the world. But, you know, you'd never get a scene of London in 1770 on a piece of furniture.
No. It had to be more exciting than just ordinary London.
Exactly. Now, have you ever noticed Maudie actually in the press?
Oh, no.
There she
I
is.
haven't ever noticed that. So she is. And there's me sitting there.
I like your hair like that.
Yeah, it suits me. No.
This chair's extraordinary. Because, I mean, Chippendale is obviously, he's picked up this idea of the fretwork motif from China.
Yes, that's pure Chinese.
Yeah. So it was enough, really, to just say, you know, that fretwork piece and
That's
the green
Chinese,
was making it Chinese.
yes.
Yeah. What, if you had to come up with a few words that summed up chinoiserie, what do you think they'd be?
Mysterious, beautiful, colourful, new, fun, exciting.
Particularly in a world which is so grey and so underplayed. Coming in here and it's not just a visual thing. You know, you can actually hear the wind rustling in the leaves. You can hear the birds.
This room is just full of song, isn't it?
Genuine oriental lacquered furniture, still very popular today, was a luxury few could afford. But that didn't stop us. Furniture makers like Chippendale come up with their own European alternative, Japanning. Japan furniture was simply painted and varnished to look like lacquer. What we in the business call a makeover. We set some ladies from Bristol a challenge to test out the art of Japanning on a humble flat-pack chest of drawers. These were the results. And just in case you think you've tuned into the wrong programme, bear with me. In the 1750s, Japanning became a real fad amongst the fashionable ladies around town, and their Bible was the whole art of Japanning made easy, or the ladies' amusement. It had over 1,000 designs and was stuffed full of tips on how to make lacquer-style furniture. So who said that makeover madness was a modern phenomenon? The Ladies' Amusement was just one of the many books at the time which tapped into the new mania for interior design by giving advice on everything from curtain palmets to floor tiles. Right, you lot, how are you getting on?
Well, I've been having trouble with the shape of this bird. I don't think it's quite...
No. You see, the thing is that you shouldn't worry about that kind of thing because, in fact, on page 4, it's quite specific. It says that with Indian and Chinese subjects, greater liberties may be taken. So you're all right there, because that is a tremendous liberty, that bird. For in them is often seen a butterfly supporting an elephant or things equally absurd. Brush your whole clear size, into 1 pint of which has been put a tablespoonful of bullock's gall. Prime your work over with it 3 or 4 times as smooth as possible, letting it dry between each priming, and if when 'tis dry no colour will come off with rubbing on your finger, 'tis fit for use. 'Tis not fit for use yet. Imagine any child's excitement waking up on Christmas morning and finding this stuffed into a stocking. It's the famous Nostell doll's house, reputedly made by Chippendale, and it is stuffed full of teeny tiny detail. Rugs, carpets, oriental porcelain, Chippendale-inspired chairs, and the most exuberant Chinese-inspired wallpaper. Wallpaper was never actually used in China. It was, in fact, only ever made for export to European markets. Over here, there was a growing demand for imitations of the painted fabrics that traditionally adorned the walls of the very best houses.
The minute you walked in the joint, I could see you were a man of distinction, a real big spender, good looking, so refined. Say, wouldn't you like to know what's going on in my mind? So let me get right to the point. I don't pop my cork for every man I see. Hey, big spender, spend a little time with me.
If you fancy a bit of Chinese-styled wallpaper in your home today, this is the place to come. Here at de Gournay in London's Chelsea, you can commission beautiful hand-painted wallpapers. But beauty comes at a price. A single roll will set you back anything from a cool £300. Why do we all go mad about the mysterious East?
I think China had a huge fascination for people who wanted to learn more about the Far East and the Orient, and they couldn't really go there. So people would like to sit in their drawing rooms and have things from the East brought to them. And of course, they relied on people to bring back images of what was there. But what the Europeans did was they changed it, so they were painting slightly idealized versions of Chinese life. They romanticized the daily life, really, of hard toil of Chinese people. they made it more colourful.
I mean, one of the things that's so seductive about Chinese papers, and looking at all of this going up now, is that you can sit in a room and read it like a storybook, but you can put your own interpretations. Do you read your own wallpaper?
Not like tea leaves in terms of looking at my future. But yes, I find that you get very used to it. It seems to begin with to be something very busy and very... People say, well, I can't put it in my room, it's going to be too complicated, I can't hang pictures, I can't live with it. But once it's there, it actually sinks into the background quite effectively, and it just looks beautiful.
What's quite obvious from the paper is that, you know, as you say, people have an emotional reaction to it. You fall in love with it. You either fall... I'm beginning to be quite seduced by it, I have to say. Does it come in lilac? Chintz. Now, how much more British can you get than that? Well, actually, if you thought that, you'd be about 4,993 miles out, roughly the distance between here and the Far East. Because that's where chintz originally came from China and India. The word chintz means variegated, and that perfectly describes the flowery patterns that have covered so many of our couches, cushions, and curtains for generations.
The original for the Sakura print that we have in this room is taken from this antique textile, which isn't Oriental, it's probably French, mid-19th century. And it's that westernised view of the Orient. You know, the flowers have that Oriental style, and yet there are elements like this wonderful cornucopia, which is very English. So I think it is that whole mix and that fusion of those different styles.
So is this the chinoiserie revival?
I think it's an element of that. I think, you know, probably as people are travelling more and more, they're getting more aware of kind of more exotic kind of styles, and they want a bit of that when they get home.
In 1850, Punch magazine published an article titled "Rubbish for Sale." They were referring to this. This is the great 19th century monument to fun, love and excess. One man's ultimate pleasure dome. That man was the Prince Regent, later George IV. The Royal Pavilion at Brighton is a weird concoction of different Eastern styles. Indian Mughal palace on the outside and Chinese inside. The most over-the-top example of chinoiserie to be found in this country, 1,000,000 miles away from real Chinese culture. This is a folly to end all follies. It took 35 years and more money than sense to complete, and the prince kept changing his mind, so costs spiral. But the effect is gobsmackingly gorgeous. Just look at this. You can imagine the prince's satisfaction when his guests filed into the banqueting hall, his most outrageous and elaborate creation. The total cost of the pavilion was a staggering £500,000, or £20 million in today's money. This incredible chandelier weighing 1 tonne cost £5,000. That's £225,000 now. The strange thing about all of this was that the Chinese taste was no longer fashionable when it seized the prince. By the early 19th century, it was a style that was more associated with places of public amusement. But George had a very good reason for wanting to single-handedly attempt a chinoiserie revival. He'd spent most of his life as Prince Regent, a king in waiting. And for him, Eastern empires with their trappings of pomp and majesty represented everything he craved. Here, in his dream palace in Brighton, George could escape into a fantasy world where everything was sumptuous, colourful, and tinged with magic. But by the 1820s, the magic was beginning to wear off. The pavilion was now widely regarded as vulgar and gaudy, and George, who had become as fat as one of his mogul domes, was lampooned mercilessly in the newspapers of the day as a wasteful buffoon. You can't help feeling that this was chinoiseries' camp old swan song, with dear old George right in the middle of it like some panto dame. But don't you just love it? As chinoiserie faded, another more refined look dawned in British design.
As I bowled along this morning, walking past my favourite store, there was something in the window that hadn't been there before. I stopped, moved even closer, pressed my face against the glass. No one else would have one, I'd have to be the first. I had to have it.
In 1850, after 2 centuries of total isolation, Japan was eventually forced to open its doors to foreigners and begin trading with the West. The flood of Japanese goods into Europe sparked a craze for all things Japanese. And after the flamboyant camp excesses of the Chinese style, this more understated look chimed well with the design philosophy of the time, which was all about craft and simplicity.
I really wanted it and didn't count the
Then, as now, the place to come and buy these new Japanese goods was the London shop, Liberty. Look at it now, the essence of Britishness, all Tudor beams and ye oldie oaky panelling. But go back to 1875 when it all began, and it's quite a different story. In the late 1860s, Arthur Lazenby Liberty was working as a humble warehouse manager when he spotted a business opportunity, selling Far Eastern goods direct to the public. The result was the now world-famous Liberty on London's Regent Street, which firmly established his reputation as one of the most daring and influential tastemakers of his day. The discerning and the curious alike flocked here to the basement of Liberty's. Then it was known as the Eastern Bazaar, and they came to marvel at the strange and exotic goods that Liberty was importing from Japan and the Far East. Elegant lacquerware, glamorous textiles, bronze statues, even Tokyo tooth powder. Liberty travelled all over, to India, Japan, North Africa and Moorish Spain, bringing back the goods that entranced his London clientele. Of all the treasures, the most eagerly sought were the soft, painted oriental silks that are still synonymous with the name of Liberty today. So what sort of man was Liberty?
Well, he was first and foremost a businessman.
Because actually, now that here he is, looking
Yes.
quite, looking a little bit sort of country gentlemanish, actually.
Yes. He was a bit of a dandy. I mean, if you look at his soft cravat and the lounge suit and the turn-down collar, I mean, he was a dandy.
So who were the people shopping at Liberty at the time? Name some names.
Well, let's look at one customer because we can.
Right. Okay. So this is your typical Liberty's customer, is it?
It's one that appeals to me.
Yes. Bless him. Who is he?
It's the Marquis.
I'm assuming it is a he.
It is a he. He's
The
got
moustache is a
moustache.
giveaway.
And he's a very flamboyant character called the Marquis of Anglesey.
Yeah.
But he is actually wearing a Liberty fabric,
Is that extraordinary?
which is very Japanese in style.
Yeah.
And here they are.
So Camp Marquis aside, what were the fabrics that they actually were shopping for?
This is what they were so famous for. These are very, very soft gauzes that they would drape in their windows on Regent Street in gradating colours. And people would copy that at home. And I mean, they'd use this to drape themselves as well. Not just their windows.
Was there ever a confusion, some terrible accidents where people got draped into their drawing room? Help, let me out. Are Liberty still producing and selling these designs?
Some of them. I mean, here's a great example of one that we still sell. This is from the 1880s. Peacock feather.
Not obviously an oriental fabric.
Not an oriental fabric or an oriental design. It's an English
Oriental
design.
bird.
An oriental bird.
Oriental bird. The peacock feather became the symbol for the most avant-garde design movement of the time, the aesthetic movement. For its pioneers, most notably the architect and designer Edward William Godwin, the aesthetic credo meant nothing less than the cultivation of beauty in every area of life. Save for an elite clique of artists and designers, however, not many ordinary folk were able to achieve the true aesthetic home that Godwin and his peers advocated. But here, in the Cotswold Hills, collector Paul Reeves has created an aesthetic haven that would have done Godwin proud. Hi.
Hi, Laurence. I'm
How do
Paul.
you do?
Nice to meet
Lovely
you.
place you got.
Thank you. Please come in. Make yourself at home.
Through here?
Yes.
This
Please
is
go ahead.
lovely. This is lovely. It's really homely.
This is how I live for my sins.
Well, is this an aesthetic interior?
It largely is. I mean, I have mixed it with other elements, but the principal things are aesthetic, and I like to think have that feel.
So what are the key notes of an aesthetic interior of the time?
Typically, you'd have rush matting on the floor, you'd have your bits of blue and white, you'd have Japanese woodcuts, you'd have the odd exquisite fan. Ebonized furniture.
Right.
I mean, Godwin, the great architect Godwin, initially designed a whole suite of ebonized furniture for himself.
Is that Godwin?
The chair is Godwin, and the fabric on it is Godwin.
So where's he getting this concept of, black lacquered furniture from?
Well, what really started it was the 1862 exhibition. Large exhibit of Japanese objects and furniture was seen for the first time, and it absolutely astounded the designers and architects who went there. It was such a sort of backlash against what was the normal Victorian design. At the time, the high Victorian design, everything was sort of ornately carved and gilded and very over the top. And for these new avant-garde young painters and designers to see this sparsity was amazing. I mean, this table here, for example, which is a Godwin coffee table. It's just so spare.
That's wafer thin,
and just the very fine turning on the legs. The key to this is that it's so refined. I mean, the top is sort of chamfered so that it's almost non-existent. It's like a sort of piece of paper. And actually, this is considered to be one of his key pieces of Anglo-Japanese furniture.
Why is Godwin such a hero for you?
He's what really does it for me. I think he just, in such a simple and honed down way, he has a magic. I can't really be academic or intellectual about it, but his designs really hit me there, which is what's important for me.
For a Victorian, Godwin's philosophy of life was remarkably up to date. It is essential for domestic comfort in these high-pressure nervous times that the common objects of everyday life should be quiet, simple, and unobtrusive in their beauty. Godwin's words would have made brilliant copy for paint manufacturers who not only try to sell us their paint, but a whole spiritual lifestyle to go with it.
Green is the colour commonly associated with balance and harmony, things strongly linked with the cultures of the East. Bring the soothing spring colours of a Japanese water garden into your home with a gentle contrast of orchid lilac and pale jade.
So that'll be purple and green then.
Your bedroom is a place where you can be as creative as you like, so make an airy, relaxing retreat that's perfect for some Eastern-style meditation at the end of a busy day.
Om, chanty chanty, om.
Dulux has brought out the Oriental range now because we picked up on a real growing interest in East meets West, a real desire to understand the spiritual side of Eastern philosophy. People are wanting their home to be more of a haven, a place where they can come from a busy world, somewhere that's their own place, much more of a calmer sort of pace of life.
What's so seductive about all of this? Why is this kind of look so popular?
There's a restraint about Oriental design which people find quite appealing now, in a period where everything's increasing in speed and imagery and everything else. It's nice to have something which is slightly quieter, and that's something that the Orientals have worked on for millennia.
This bowl, I think, is absolutely, fantastic. It's beautiful colour.
I like the fact that it's a very nice charcoal grey. It's not just a plain black. I like the shape of it, the fact that it's very simple.
It's made for what it's made for, but it's also so beautiful as well, just lovely shape.
My house is quite minimal, so the furniture I have in it, I'd like to have clean, empty spaces.
I've got kind of the stereotypical huge kind of paper lantern, kind of Japanese style. It's just got kind of a more subdued mood to it, more relaxing feel.
I think it's very contemplative, and it is very kind of calming, and in a way you're sort of, perhaps it makes you look inwards a bit.
We spend a lot more time at home these days, and it's good to be kind of in those surroundings.
This has become something that has really taken off over the last... And, you pioneered this idea of sticking a few bamboo twigs in a vase, and everybody does it now.
It's not a pioneering thing from Habitat, it's something which is direct from the Orient. And Ikebana is still a massive hobby over there. In fact, it's increasing, and I think it's going to become very popular here. But even this arrangement here would have been construed as a crime against flower arranging even 20 years ago. And this has become one of our most successful lines, which is, very peculiar if you look at it just like that. But there's something very nice about the way that even things like this are made to look precious in Oriental interiors. And it's a very simple way of doing flower arranging for incompetence. But like I say, it would not have been read as an attractive object 10 years ago. Yeah. And it's one of those fashion things where your perception of flowers changed. No?
The other thing that I think what's quite illuminating about this particular way of displaying the look is that it's obviously not just about the way it looks, it's a lifestyle. We're obviously about to sit down and have a Japanese-inspired dinner party.
I think it's a very appealing cultural tradition, which is about living with less and eating in a more healthy way, which comes directly from places like Japan and China, and it's becoming even more appropriate now, yeah.
Life in the 21st century. It's enough to give anyone indigestion. So, what do? We turn to the calm haven of Japanese spirituality. But, hang on a minute. Calm, peace, Zen, Japan? Surely some mistake. Isn't this the Japan of today? Speed, convenience, technology, fast food. Today, we know that the reality of Japanese life is far from tranquil. Japan is, after all, the most technologically advanced nation in the world. But we still yearn for the peace and spirituality of the Japan we imagine. And where better to find peace and tranquility than a traditional Japanese Zen garden? What's the significance of raking in a Japanese garden?
It's the original idea for a temple and a Buddhist monk to meditate for raking. So every morning and before sleep, and they do very simple action.
Yeah.
To meditate, to calm down.
Right. Yes. So it's a bit like yoga or something.
That's
a
good.
Series of very simple movements. And how often does the garden get raked though?
In the temple about 4 times a day.
And yours?
Be honest about this.
Once a week?
Once a year?
Once a year. Well, because, I mean, I'm assuming that everything in this garden is not put here because it looks good. There is a significance for the placement of all the elements.
Absolutely. In Japanese gardens, as in most Japanese art, there's no 50-50 balance. Everything's asymmetrical.
Are there tremendous significances, the patterns that you rake in the gravel?
One can create a completely different atmosphere by raking different patterns. Sometimes when you want to create a more strong or agitated feeling, we can make far deeper or quite strong movements in the pebbles, and you get a completely different energetic atmosphere.
Is this quite a good barometer for you when you look out of the bedroom window and you see how he's raked the gravel? You think, oh, blimey, I better give him a wide berth this morning.
I know exactly what mood he's in. I know at the moment I can speak to him quite gently.
A kind of communication
but you can
system.
tell moods. For a long time, we've tended to have quite cluttered homes, quite decorative wallpapers, carpets, designs on furniture. And I think people are much more open and receptive to a more simple way of living, decorating their homes.
I mean, am I right in calling that Zen? Is that a Zen approach?
A Zen approach is to bring things to their simplest. And as life becomes more and more pressured, we want an alternative in our homes. And I think people are becoming more open to the peace or the tranquility or the depth that Oriental art and culture can offer. And that, in a way, that is Zen.
On this journey, we've seen how the marriage of the East and the West has produced some wonderful wayward offspring. In the 18th century, few knew the reality of the faraway East, but these days, we can be in Tokyo within 12 hours. But despite knowing so much more, we're still drawn to a fantasy Orient. Magical, mysterious, mystical, and remote. The only difference is that in the 21st century, we're prepared to show a little bit more respect. Next week, I'm travelling to the ancient city of Rome to see just how its pillars and columns left their mark on our cities and homes.
For you to take, for all.
And finding out just how our taste for the classical style was created by rich aristocrats in the 18th century. I'll be meeting modern enthusiasts for classicism and asking why we've got family pictures on the fireplace.